moral act must come.
Welcome to this explainer. You know, today we are embarking on a genuinely fascinating journey, exploring a profound question asked by one of history's greatest thinkers, Mahatma Gandhi. For students across Karnataka studying this for their Class 10 SSLC exams, and honestly, for anyone trying to navigate the complexities of the modern world, Gandhi's essay, What is Moral Action?, is the kind of text that forces us to look deeply in the mirror and ask, why do we actually do the things we do? So, guided by the Mahatma, let's sit together under the shade of a banyan tree and spin the delicate threads of his philosophy into a clear, understandable tapestry.
To really grasp Gandhi's definition of morality, we're going to follow the path of the charkha, the spinning wheel, through 5 distinct steps. We'll look at moving beyond customs, the power of intention, freedom from fear, stepping beyond self-interest, and finally, having the courage to be moral. Let's see how these weave together.
All right, let's jump right into Section 1, Beyond Customs. Let's see why just following the rules of everyday society isn't exactly what it seems.
So Gandhi points out that most of what we do every single day is, well, just following the crowd, right? We observe customs, we follow laws, and hey, that's a good thing. Without it, society would literally fall into anarchy. But, and this is a massive but here, just observing customs cannot be called morality. If you're acting like a machine, kind of just going with the flow, there's actually zero moral content in your action. For an act to be truly moral, it absolutely has to spring from your own individual will. You've got to do it on purpose.
To explain this, Gandhi gives us this brilliant example of a king and a messenger. Picture a king who, listening to his own conscience, decides to pardon a culprit. Now that is a moral act. He used his own discrimination and intent. But what about the messenger who physically carries that pardon down to the jail? Well, if the messenger is just acting like a mechanical courier, letting himself be swept along like a log in a river, he plays no moral part in this whole thing. However, if that messenger carries the order intentionally, actually considering it his deep personal duty to save a life, well then his action becomes a moral one too. It's all about engaging your own brain and your power of thought.
And that actually brings us to this incredibly powerful quote from the American abolitionist Wendell Phillips. He said, "Till you learn to form your own opinions and express them, I do not care much what you think of me." Man, Gandhi absolutely loved this. Stepping onto the moral road means you have to defy convention when necessary, and really listen to the voice of your own conscience. You literally can't just be a mechanical cog in the machine. You have to be an active, thinking participant.
Okay, moving on to Section 2, the power of intention. Let's look at why simply doing a good deed actually isn't enough on its own. The crucial point here is intention. Imagine 2 men performing the exact same action, feeding the hungry in a village. On the surface, the visible outcome is identical. People are getting fed. But let's say the man on the left feeds the poor out of genuine pity and compassion. Meanwhile, the man on the right, he does it solely to win prestige, to look good in front of the community, or maybe for some other selfish reason. Gandhi argues that the act driven by compassion is a moral one, but the act driven by prestige is fundamentally something else entirely.
And this brings us to a super important academic distinction that you really need to understand. The action of that selfish man who feeds the poor, it isn't immoral. I mean, he is still feeding people. He's not doing anything evil. But Gandhi classifies it as non-moral. A non-moral act might actually have fantastic results, but because it totally lacks a pure, selfless intention, it's completely devoid of true morality. I mean, think about it. The ultimate result isn't really in our control anyway, right? Only our intention is.
Let's look at a famous historical example of this whole non-moral concept. Historians call him Alexander the Great. Wherever his armies marched, he spread Greek language, arts, culture, you name it. And honestly, the world reaped massive benefits from this. But what was Alexander's actual intention? It was pure conquest and personal fame. So, because his motives were entirely rooted in ego and power, Gandhi argues that despite those positive historical outcomes, Alexander's actions cannot be called moral. Great? Sure, maybe, but definitely not moral.
All right, let's spin the narrative forward to Section 3, freedom from fear. We've talked a lot about intent, but what happens when our actions are essentially forced by external pressure?
Gandhi was absolutely adamant about this. For an act to be moral, it must be completely free from fear and compulsion. Think about everyday life for a second. If you wake up super early only out of the terrifying fear of losing your job, there is zero morality in your early rising. Or if you live a really simple, unpretentious life, but only because you're stuck in poverty and literally lack the means to live otherwise, that's not a moral choice. That's a forced reality.
Or consider a wealthy factory owner who pays his workers fair wages, but only because he is absolutely terrified they're going to strike. None of these are moral acts. Compulsion completely strips an action of its moral dignity.
To really hammer this point home, Gandhi points to the historical test case of King Richard II of England. Picture the scene. Angry peasants rise up in revolt, marching straight to the king, demanding their rights. Terrified, King Richard actually grants them these rights, literally signing the letters under his own royal seal. But, and here's the kicker, the very second the danger passes and the crowds disperse, he forces those peasants to surrender those exact same letters.
Now, I want you to pause for a second and really think about this. Was King Richard's first act, granting the rights, a moral act, while his second act, taking them away, immoral?
Well, Gandhi says it would be a massive mistake to view it that way. Actually, his first act didn't have a single iota of morality about it. Why? Because fear disguised as kindness is never true morality. He didn't grant those rights because it was the right thing to do. He did it because he was scared out of his mind. And naturally, when the fear vanished, so did the quote-unquote good behavior. Which naturally leads us right into Section 4, beyond self-interest and reward. If fear ruins morality, what exactly happens when we expect a reward for our good deeds?
To answer that, Gandhi borrows a profoundly beautiful thought from Shakespeare. Love born out of the profit motive is no love. This completely shatters that old saying we've all heard, that honesty is the best policy. If you're only being honest because you think it'll pay off for you in the long run, your honesty is incredibly fragile and entirely self-interested. True morality just cannot be treated like a business transaction.
And by the way, it's not just about earthly gain like comfort, wealth, or prestige. Gandhi argues that acting for a heavenly gain is equally non-moral. Seriously, if you're only doing good deeds because you want a VIP seat in heaven after you die, you are still acting out of personal self-interest. He points to the great Christian missionary St. Francis Xavier, who prayed constantly, but not to secure a spot in heaven. He prayed simply because he believed it was his pure duty to God, completely devoid of any expected reward.
Which brings us to one of the most striking and honestly passionate pieces of imagery in Gandhi's entire essay. He writes of the great Saint Theresa, who wished to walk around with a burning torch in her right hand and a vessel of water in her left. Why? So she could literally burn away the glories of heaven with the torch and extinguish the fires of hell with the water. She wanted to remove the temptation of heavenly bliss and the fear of hellish punishment entirely from the equation, because only then, she believed, would mankind finally learn to serve God and do good out of pure love alone. Now that is the ultimate ideal of moral action.
And now, we transition to Section 5, the courage to be moral. This is the final and undoubtedly the most demanding step on Gandhi's moral road, because living this way, it requires absolute bravery.
Because living without fear and without self-interest is honestly quite dangerous. Preserving morality demands a brave person, someone prepared to face even death. The cost of cowardice is incredibly high. Gandhi notes that doing good haltingly or being true to your friends but breaking faith with your enemies out of fear is just cowardly. He points to historical giants like Henry Clay, who literally sacrificed his deep convictions just to fuel his own ambition. Or Daniel Webster, a man of immense intellect, who sold his intellectual integrity for a price. In a single, mean act of cowardice, these men wiped out a lifetime of good deeds. True morality, guys, is simply not for the faint of heart.
So how do all these threads weave together to form the complete anatomy of a moral act? Let's recap. First, it must spring entirely from our own will, not some mechanical habit. Second, it has to be driven by pure intention, not just positive outcomes. Third, it has to be utterly free from fear and compulsion. Fourth, completely devoid of self-interest, whether earthly or heavenly. And holding this entire tapestry together, it requires immense, unwavering courage. Which leaves us with a pretty provocative thought. Considering just how incredibly high Gandhi sets the bar here, requiring pure, selfless, fearless intention, can we ever truly judge the morality of another person's action? Gandhi concludes that because we can never actually penetrate the depths of another person's mind to see their real motives, we really can't. True morality is a deeply personal internal journey. It is strictly between you and your conscience. I really hope this explainer has inspired you to look closely at your own threads of action. Thanks for learning with me today, and keep asking the big questions.
A moral act must come from you, not just a task you're told to do. A king may pardon, choice is his, the messenger just carries it. Think for yourself, be brave and wise, as Phillips said, let truth arise. Moral action pure and bright, guided by the truth and right. Free from fear and selfish gain, done with love, not hope of fame. Two men fed the hungry poor, one with kindness from his core. One sought praise and public cheer, his true motive wasn't clear. Alexander conquered lands afar, but conquest alone brings no moral star. King Richard granted rights one day, but fear had led him on that way. When danger passed, he changed his mind. A moral heart is hard to find. True goodness acts when no one's near, not driven by compulsion or fear. Honesty for profit's sake cannot endure when trials awake. Love for gain is not love true. Shakespeare's wisdom still shines through. Xavier and Theresa gave pure love to God, faithful and brave, faithful and brave. Moral action Gandhi's way, choose the good each passing day. From your heart let virtue start, selfless love within your heart. Selfless love within your heart.